Sorry, the only thing I want to say right now is something my brother always used to say, thank you. I have so much to live for. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our family, welcome to the celebration of life for Mike Macdonald. Thank you so much for coming, and for those that are watching on the internet, thanks for joining us. First off, I'd like to start off by saying thanks to everyone for all your heartfelt condolences and your kind words. It has not gone unnoticed. It's been really helpful for all of us. I'd like to thank our family members that have traveled far and wide, mostly from Vancouver and from Halifax, and from down in the Toronto area as well. And I especially want to thank Mike's friends who have traveled from LA, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and other places as well. Thank you all for coming tonight. I think we've all seen the tributes to my brother pouring out in the last few weeks. People use words like legend, genius, gifted, prolific, groundbreaking, risk-taking, mentor, supporter, teacher. Well, and most of all, my favorite, the king of Canadian comedy. Stop my ribs. You know, he was all of those things to me and more. He was also a son, a husband, a brother, an uncle, a great uncle, a godfather, and a friend. All right, I know I'm biased because I'm his little brother. But I think he's the funniest comedian I've ever seen. He's certainly the most prolific. When he started out, he told me he prepared 3 45-minute sets of comedy. And, sorry, I've lost my place here. For his very first performance, which happened to be at the Rodders Club at Bank and Frank. And by the way, Stuart Smith and Carl Schultz from the Rodders Club are actually here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Howie Wegman gives me a call well, not him personally, but somebody from the club gives me a call every year. So I go in, and I did this a few times with Mike, and we'd go in and do the summer comedy contest and judge the comedians. So I know what it's like for a young comedian to work on his first 5 minutes of material, to hone it, to get it just right. It's unheard of for a comedian that's never set foot on a stage before to walk up and bring 3 45-minute sets. I mean, there was no rule book back then. And that's why they said, you know, he was a groundbreaker. He appeared in, I think it was more than 24 Just for Laughs over the years. And he never repeated one comedy bit at all. He's got boxes of notes and ideas at home, all sorts of video and audio recordings. And he never stopped writing. In fact, the last time I visited him at the Heart Institute last month, he was telling us stories about his new adventure. And I said, it sounds like material for a new routine. He immediately answered, I'm keeping notes. It's true, that would have been a damn good routine, I'm telling you. Mike had a great influence on me, starting at a very young age. He was 5.5 years older than I was which for a kid is huge. He introduced me to all sorts of cool music, the Beatles in particular, which of course I am a very big fan, as was Mike, which is why we were listening to Beatles coming into the room tonight. You know, we used to live right next to Brookfield High School. In fact, I moved back to the old neighborhood with my wife about 10 years ago. And, you know, whenever Mike had a show with the band or a concert where he was acting, Mom would always take us there, long before I was ever a student at the school. And I have to tell you, when I saw Mike playing drums with a rock band, or on stage with friends making people laugh, or acting and singing in a musical, wearing a gold lame suit, it made me want to do the same thing. I don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for Mike. He was such a profound influence on me. I mean, sure, I would... Sure, I would have still loved music, but I don't think I would have taken the chance to go on stage and perform. I certainly would have never tried to make a living at it. Mike showed me the way. Growing up with Mike was mostly fun. As we grew up, Mike ended up being babysitter to me and my younger brother David. And it was okay as long as Mike wasn't missing some party with all his friends. Then it wasn't so okay. Now, some of the fun memories include New Year's Eve in Ramstein. That was the base we lived on from 1964 to 1969. So we were just little kids, and Mike was just about to become a teenager by the time we left. And he would always babysit us for New Year's Eve, because of course Mom and Dad went out dancing. That's what they did most Saturday nights as well. But I do remember New Year's Eve in Ramstein, because just before midnight, Mike would give me and Dave each a big pot, with, you know, one of those big long handles, and a long wooden spoon. And on his cue, we would stick them out the window and bash the shit out of him as loud as we could. I mean, we basically were his minions. Whatever he said, we did. So when it's midnight on New Year's Eve and Mom and Dad aren't home, you make as much noise as you can at midnight to celebrate. Anyway, that's one of our fun memories. There was another New Year's Eve I remember quite fondly as well, also in Ramstein. Mom used to bake a lot. Mike used to watch from time to time. So one New Year's Eve, he decided, hey, why don't I make a chocolate cake for all three of us? Of course, me and Dave were like, yeah, chocolate cake is great. Only Mike didn't have a recipe. But he'd seen Mom bake, so he knew all the stuff he was supposed to grab out of the cupboard, you know, the flour and the butter and the milk and the baking soda and, of course, the raw chocolate and all that. And so he made it, and I thought, and David thought, it looked pretty good. Mom got home, took one look at the thing, and threw it immediately in the garbage. I mean, like it was rat poison or something. But Mom told me that the only reason she threw it out is it didn't rise, and it probably would have made us sick, but anyhow. I do have a slideshow that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks. It's taken a while. We had a lot of pictures that Bonnie brought from Mike's home, pictures that I didn't even know he had from way back. In fact, he had a picture that I hadn't seen in probably 45 years, and I was like, that's where that photo went. But, so I've been pretty immersed in Mike Macdonald's history. So I prepared a slideshow. Because I don't have pictures for every single point in Mike's life, it's not going to mention the several movies Mike was in or all the television appearances, although there's a couple of photos. Or that he holds the record for most Just for Laughs performances. It doesn't mention he was nominated for the 2 Gemini Awards, and, among others. Or that he made 4 primetime comedy specials on Target, My House, My Rules, my personal favorite, Happy as I Can Be, as opposed to Happy as I Can Be, and one that only was on the air once, called Mike Macdonald's Politically Correct Canadian Christmas. Wait for it. We're going to put it on YouTube very soon. Thank you. So anyway, at this point, we would like to play the reel. I want to thank Brendan Mertens, who worked all through the night last night, putting it together. I came over to do the narration that's going to be underneath the photos. And I hope you all enjoy it. I'll be back in just a moment. And here we go, the slideshow. In 1953, Reg Macdonald was in the Royal Canadian Air Force, stationed in Metz, France. He met Colette Buer, the daughter of a restaurateur, and according to Mom, it was love at first sight. They decided to get married and have a kid that made fun of them. Almost a year to the day later, on June 21st, 1955, Michel Alain Macdonald was born. Mom and Dad were so happy. They lived with Mom's family for the first couple of years. That's when Mike learned to play his first game. Here he is in Dad's Nash Rambler. He also spent time outside in his playpen, walks in the park, and visiting the swans at the pond. In 1957, Dad was transferred to Greenwood, Nova Scotia. Mike enjoyed his first Canadian winter. He even learned to skate. Well, sort of. Mike's favorite time of the year was Christmas. Here he is in his housecoat, surrounded by his toys and games, reading a comic book. Sound familiar? His favorite toy was his guitar. Well, and his new puppy. Mike loved animals. But he really liked the guitar. I think he thought he was a rock star. Yep, he was king of the castle. In early 1960, Mike went back to France with Mom to visit his grandmother and his great-grandmother. He enjoyed the winter carnival and the spring fair and pretty much anything that had rides. Here he is with some birds at the fair. But he was missing his father, and he was so happy when Dad finally arrived. And so was Mom. You'll never guess what happened 9 months later. Yup, I was born. Mike didn't seem to be too happy about it at all. He was kind of used to having all the attention. Soon after that, the family moved to Halifax. That's when Dave came along. Mike helped out by looking after me sometimes. Here he is at Uncle Clyde's graduation. He even got to wear the cool hat. In 1964, Mike got the news. The family was moving to Germany, a NATO base called Ramstein. It was pretty cool, actually. They had a big air show every year with lots of cool planes. We even got to go inside some of them and check it out. Every vacation, Dad would take us on a road trip. The Autobahn made it easy to get around. We'd get dressed up and go visiting because Mom had extended family living in Germany, including her aunt, uncle, and cousins. In '66, our aunt and uncle came to visit us from Canada. So 4 adults and 3 kids piled into this little 2-door for 3 weeks.
and went to visit old buildings. And more old buildings. And more stupid old buildings. Mike liked Venice the best. He even had a bird land on his head. Then it was back on the road again. When I think back on it, these are the trips Mike probably used to joke about in his act. And then at the end of the trip, we went to France to visit Mom's family. Mom's grandmother had a new building built for her restaurant. We were excited to check it out for the first time. When vacation ended, we were back to school, and for Mike, back to Cubs, and eventually Scouts. Look at him hamming it up with his friends, and playing with his new James Bond gun. Dad was so proud of his young Scout. Then there was Christmas. We had a party on the base every year. Even Santa Claus came. Mike loved Christmas. Mike was never what you'd call a jock, but he was a good jumper. He could jump pretty high. Our visiting days in Germany were coming to an end. Dad got the word that we were moving to Ottawa in the summer of '69. That September, Mike started grade 9 at Brookfield High School. His first friend was Manny Montenegrino. They eventually worked together writing and acting in sketch comedy. Mike's other passion was drumming. He joined a band called Maple Ridge, dropped out of high school, and toured Canada. Unfortunately, it was a rock and roll fantasy, and Mike eventually returned to high school. The second time around, he was more interested in being funny. Here he is with Manny in a skit called Gluttony. In 1974, I started grade 9 at Brookfield. It was pretty cool because Mike was co-president and the big kids left me alone. Here's Mike at a successful fundraiser event in the cafeteria. He managed to extract over $700 out of the crowds that gathered. It was all part of Spirit Week, and Mike was Captain Spirit. No matter what he did, he gave it his all. I think the most fun he had was playing Conrad Birdie in Bye Bye Birdie that year. He sang songs and danced, as well as wearing this cool gold lame suit. Although Mike returned to Brookfield the following year, he finished school at Woodruff High School to graduate earlier. This was the only time in his life that he actually used the bus. That summer, like most summers, we went to Nova Scotia to visit relatives. And we got dressed up too. Mike eventually got a job as a teacher's assistant, and he loved his kids. He was always supportive of me and my musical efforts. I even got those drums from him. In early 1979, he headlined a coffee house in the Brookfield cafeteria. Even though he was still new to stand-up, he totally killed it. Look at this early version of the rock star routine. No huge sunglasses or coat hanger on his head. Mike actually started comedy in a punk rock club, but it wasn't long before he was playing all over town. He had a residency at Hiccups, all the while honing his craft. Mike played all sorts of clubs those days. Mike was at home on stage. Mike also liked pointing his fingers in his act. I think it was supposed to be a gun or something like that. Mike used to open for bands at Barrymore's too. This is the actual photo that hung in the Barrymore's office for years. One of their favorites, I understand. Mike was getting so popular, he started to work in Toronto. He met Mark Breslin early on, playing at Yuck Yucks. They liked to have fun, and Mike was always trying to make people laugh. He enjoyed playing in Toronto, and when he stepped on stage, he took it over. Mike killed it whenever he was there. The writing was on the wall, and he knew what his next step was. In mid-'79, he quit his day job, he said so long to the family, and he moved to Toronto and hit the road. He was playing all sorts of stages, all over the place, night after night. Without a doubt, the biggest part of Mike's act in the early days was the rock and roll fantasy. This was the big finish. He did a big photo shoot for this bit. He even customized some of the pics. I bet he had fun taking these shots. This part of his act helped him get a lot of gigs. There was only one drawback to all of Mike's success. Sometimes the rock star life became all too real. Mike was known to be pretty cranky back then. Luckily, Mike met Bonnie, and things began to change. Mike soon brought Bonnie home for Christmas. After our Christmas Eve cold cuts, we went downstairs to open presents. That was Mike's favorite part. The next day was Christmas dinner. Mike and Bonnie were all lovey-dovey. It was great to see him so happy. Did I mention that Mike loved Christmas? I forgot to mention that Mike was making movies too. Some projects were really fun, even hanging out with friends. Other projects, not fun at all. Mike and Bonnie decided to get married in the summer of 1987. Mike's friend Rich joined them in Vegas to be best man. By early 1988, they'd moved to LA and Mike's career was exploding. That summer, Mike and his manager Howard went to Just for Laughs in Montreal. This was Mike's 5th year in a row at the festival, in a run that eventually lasted over 2 decades. He also got to meet John Candy that summer. After it was all over, it was back to LA to Bonnie and his dogs, Robo and Penny. Mike was back in Ottawa in the summer of 1989. Here he is with Mom. Check out the gas prices. It was Dave and Shannon's wedding that summer. Even Grandma made it up from Nova Scotia. Here we are, all dressed up again. Mike and Bonnie had just celebrated their 2nd anniversary. The reception was in a room right next to Yuck Yucks in the basement of the Beacon Arms. That fall, Mike started a new TV show, Mosquito Lake. When he came home for Christmas that year, he bought Dad a new car. Mike kept on doing what he loved, playing comedy clubs, making people laugh, and hanging out with the other comedians. Sometimes it was fun, other times not so much. Here he is at the Geminis. He was nominated twice, you know. Here he is hanging out with Rich, his longtime friend. Mike usually played the Ottawa Yucks a couple times a year. He always did well on the home stage. Sometimes we got to work together when he was in town. He did TV with Super Dave, and he went on Ralph's show too, amongst others. He also did a show with all sorts of great Canadian comedians. Calgary even made him an honorary citizen once. They gave him a big hat too. In 2004, we all went to Vegas for Mom and Dad's 50th anniversary. Then we got lost, but it all worked out in the end. Mike and Bonnie were in town in late 2006. The whole family went to dinner. And of course, they came over for Christmas. Did I mention Mike loves Christmas? Soon it was time to get back on the road, back on stage, and spending time hanging with friends. Here's Mike in Halifax. He doesn't ride. The owner just wanted a pic of Mike on his bike. My brother's proudest moments were entertaining our troops. He's in the back with the hat. He loved meeting the soldiers, and I think he liked dressing up too. Sometimes he ran into friends from Ottawa. Doing shows in the desert sure is different than comedy clubs. You still have a mic and a stand, but sometimes the stage is the back of a truck. Apparently, gun jokes go over well with this audience. He was thrilled to entertain so many troops over the years, especially on Canada Day. He understood their sacrifice and loved and appreciated them for it. I think they loved him back. After some much-needed rest, Mike was back for Christmas, handing out presents for local kids. How cool is that? Whenever Mike was in town, he would drop by. This is at Dave's place. And he would always support me at my shows too. Mike came back to Ottawa for good in 2011 because Dad wasn't doing so well. He had a big show at Yuck Yucks that summer. We went to a few radio stations to talk about the show. He even did a TV interview. The week before Mike's show, we went to check out Tom's show at Yuck Yucks. He was great. Mike's show did extremely well too, so much so that he played Preston Street Yuck Yucks the following week. Sadly, a week later, our father passed away. Not long after that, Mike's health started a long decline. Fortunately, a donor match was found for Mike in the nick of time, thanks to a generous person who filled out their donor card. Mike received a new liver on March 17th, 2013, and was forever grateful. After a long and bumpy recovery, Mike got back on stage again and started doing more fundraisers than ever. We even got to work together again too. In April of 2014, it was my turn to get married to my beautiful wife, Lynn. We had a ball. Mike thought it was fun too. Later that summer, Cousin Jane got married in Halifax. Lots of our Nova Scotia relatives were there. Mike just happened to be in town on tour on a day off. How lucky is that? Now that Mike and Bonnie lived in Ottawa, we got to see a lot more of them, and they got to see their grandniece, Chloe. Mike continued working right up to the end. Our final family gathering together was in January of this year for Mom's 85th birthday.